Over on Jaguar Gator 8, a new college football video is out. In this video, we talk about the 1983 Boston College Eagles and the bizarre schedule that they had that was so strange that none of the players or coaches knew what to do about it. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. Also, join me tomorrow night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play NFL Trivia for a chance to win cash prizes. Link to play below. And now, on with our feature presentation. I want you to imagine this scenario. You're a person attending a workout because you want to watch the player that's being worked out and support him. This player is going into the NFL for sure, so you want to be there while the scouts are there just to let him know that you have his back. Then you decide out of nowhere to ask the coach conducting the workout and conducting the evaluation if you could have a shot, and if you could participate in the drills too, thinking, why not? I've got nothing to lose. The coach, amazingly enough, says yes. Even though you look nothing like an NFL player, you're obviously not getting drafted and seem like you have no business playing in the NFL. And then you wind up playing a decade in the NFL, make it to 3 Pro Bowls, are considered one of the best players in franchise history at your position, and outlast the guy who got the workout in the first place. Something like this scenario seems absolutely ridiculous and completely made up. If you propose this script to a Hollywood executive about a slow, undersized person walking up to a coach and asking him to give him a look, almost in the same style as those musical movies where they're wrapping up the audition process and this guy busts in out of nowhere and asks for a chance, they would laugh in your face for how stupid it sounds. Yet as crazy as this scenario seems, that's exactly what happened in 1978. The Green Bay Packers were scouting one player and walked away with another good player completely out of nowhere. This is the story behind the craziest signing in the history of the Packers franchise. Before I talk about the signing in question, we need some context to understand who this person was, how he got this opportunity, and perhaps most importantly, who the player in question was that the Packers were originally looking at. Unfortunately, there is no footage available of either of the two players involved from their time in college, because in terms of difficulty, trying to find Kansas State footage from the 1970s is the equivalent of the Jets trying to find a 4,000-yard passer. However, we do have footage of these players and their stints in the NFL, so that will have to suffice. And initially, our story involves a linebacker named Gary Spani. When people talk about the greatest defenders in the history of the Kansas State football program, usually, one of the first names that enters the discussion is Spani. For 3 consecutive seasons from 1975 to 77, he led the team in tackles, and he was named the MVP of the Wildcats in each of his final 2 seasons. By the time he left Kansas State after the 1977 season, he was the all-time leader in program history in tackles and assisted tackles, and in 1977, he was named a consensus All-American player, becoming the first player in program history to ever receive this consensus honor. Not only is Spani a member of the Kansas State Sports Hall of Fame, but he became the first player in program history to ever be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. He was that good. And the accolades keep going. He became the first player in program history to ever be named an All-American twice, and by the time his career ended, he had more All-Americans by himself than everyone else in Kansas State history combined. And his 178 tackles as a senior was the most in program history in a single season at the time, although it since has been surpassed. Spani had 3 seasons with 150 or more tackles at a time where every other player in program history had 2 combined, and his 200 solo tackles ranked first in program history by the time he graduated. Don't get me wrong, Kansas State was not a good football team. There's a reason you can't find footage of them from 1977 anywhere, and that's because they won just 1 game, going winless in Big 8 play. Technically they won 2, but that's only because Mississippi State, after winning 24-21, was retroactively forced to forfeit the game. However, Spani was a bright spot, and there was absolutely no doubt that he was going to get drafted. And plenty of teams like the Green Bay Packers, who had a starting linebacker unit in 1977 whose average age was 29, and had 2 starters that would be on the wrong side of 30 by 1978, were looking for a guy like Spani to join their team. With that, the Packers scheduled Spani for a workout. And during this workout, there would be another man in attendance that would change everything. The man you're watching right now is tight end Paul Coffman. Again, Kansas State was a really bad football team in 1977, but Coffman was another one of those bright spots, as he finished the season with 25 receptions for 427 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Wildcats threw just 5 touchdown passes all season, with Coffman catching more touchdowns than every other player on the team combined, along with finishing second on the team in receptions and receiving yards. And as a senior, Coffman was so good that he finished 5th in the conference in receptions, 3rd in receiving yards, 2nd in yards per catch, and 1st in receiving touchdowns, becoming the first player in school history since Willis Crenshaw all the way back in 1960 to lead the conference in this category. For perspective, that was so long ago that when Crenshaw accomplished this feat, he did it with 2 touchdowns. That was it. Again, Coffman accomplished quite a lot during his senior season with the team. He scored on an 89-yard touchdown pass against Missouri, which at the time was the longest pass play in the history of the program. He led the team in scoring not just amongst receivers and tight ends, but amongst all players period during the 1977 campaign. And many people regarded him as one of the best tight ends in the Big 8. However, he was getting absolutely no looks at the NFL level, and it's not too hard to see why. There are certain guys where, even though they have great collegiate careers, you just know right off the bat that their skills are not going to translate at the next level, and Coffman seemed like a perfect example of that. He just didn't look the part. As Spani said on Coffman, even in college, the coaches were always looking for someone to replace Paul. They were never satisfied with him. He wasn't big enough, he wasn't fast enough, he had crooked elbows, it was always something. They seemed to feel they could always find someone better. He was 6'3" at a time where to play tight end in the NFL, you pretty much had to be 6'4" or taller. He weighed in at just 212 pounds, at a time where the top tight ends in the league like Dave Casper and Russ Francis were weighing in somewhere around 240 pounds. And he ran the 40-yard dash in just 4.8 seconds, which was not exactly the fastest time in the world. There was not a chance that Coffman was going to play at the next level. He was too short, he was too slow, and he was too undersized. He was super close friends with Spani, as Spani always admired his work ethic. Plus, it helped that the two men were roommates and got along. In fact, they more than got along, they were best friends, as Coffman talked about his experience going to a preseason game between the Vikings and the Chiefs at Arrowhead Stadium, since Coffman was a self-proclaimed Vikings fan. So with Spani getting interest from other teams since everyone knew he was going to be taken, Coffman decided that he would be there to support him and support his best friend, when the Green Bay Packers and coach John Meyer visited the Manhattan campus to work him out. Little did Coffman know that this day was going to completely change his life. Again, the scouts were solely coming for Spani. Maybe if they knew the Big 8 well and knew of the top offensive player on a team that went 6-27 over the previous 3 seasons, they would have heard of Coffman. But Coffman had no shot at playing professionally. As Coffman said, "I'm a realist. I talked to a lot of teams and agents, and no one heard of me. So I figured that if they had not heard of me, they weren't going to draft me." This day was all about Spani, and this was Spani's chance to shine. However, when Meyer came down to Manhattan to watch Spani work out, Coffman approached him and asked him if he could run the drills too, just because. Remember, Coffman was a 6'3", 212-pound tight end, woefully undersized for the next level. As Coffman said, "On paper, I guess I wasn't the best looking tight end around." And Coffman had no idea what Meyer's reaction was going to be. On one hand, it couldn't hurt to ask, as the worst thing he could technically do is say no, bringing you right back to the position you started in. However, Meyer also could have kicked Coffman out and asked him to leave, meaning that Spani would not have Coffman there to support him, which could have made Spani angry at him for trying to upstage his moment and for leaving a bad impression on the program. But when Coffman approached Meyer and asked him for an opportunity just to participate in the workout, to just about everyone's surprise, Meyer said yes. He figured why not. Remember that Kansas State was not a good team, and Spani was the only player that had a shot at getting drafted and was working out. It wasn't like this would be too many bodies to keep track of. If Meyer, the linebackers coach, could handle working with an entire linebackers unit and keep track of everyone, he could handle working with 2 players instead of 1. In other words, Coffman just walked up to a coach and asked him to look at him. And this plan actually worked. Meyer seemed surprisingly chill about the whole situation, saying when Coffman asked the question, "Yeah, sure, you can run through them." Out of nowhere, Coffman got his opportunity. And the workout went so successful, with Coffman catching every pass thrown his way, that afterwards, Meyer said, "If we don't get in touch with you and you don't get drafted, you get in touch with us." Still, Coffman was not expecting anything to come from this. In fact, when the draft happened, he was more worried about where Spani was going to go rather than himself. As Coffman said on what draft day was like, "I had a test in physics. I studied and didn't worry about the draft. I knew I wasn't going anywhere." Sure enough, Spani went to the Chiefs in the 3rd round, while Coffman went undrafted. But 2 weeks after the draft concluded, well after the first wave of undrafted free agency, Coffman heard the telephone ring. It was the Green Bay Packers. They wanted to bring him on as their 7th-string tight end going into camp. I'm just trying to imagine how Meyer, who is a linebacker and knows nothing about tight ends, talked to head coach Bart Starr and the other front office members as he tried to pitch this. So yeah, I know we were supposed to scout this linebacker and that's what you wanted me to do, but this random person came up to me during the workout and asked if he could run some drills. You gotta trust me on this one, I swear. Somehow, this actually worked out, and Coffman got his shot to play in the NFL. And the rest is history, because what followed was, considering the circumstances, One of the craziest and most remarkable careers in NFL history. Remember back in 2016 when a wide receiver stood outside Gillette Stadium every day until the Patriots gave him a tryout? Nothing ever came of that. But imagine if that player wound up playing a decade in the NFL and made it to 3 Pro Bowls. Because that's what happened to Paul Coffman. Somehow, this undersized tight end who was on no one's radar and was only being considered in the first place because he walked up to a coach and asked him for a shot, turned out to be an incredible player. Even though he was buried on the depth chart in 1978 and didn't touch the ball once, by 1979, not only was he a contributor, but he was the team's starting tight end for all 16 games. It came completely out of nowhere. And Coffman responded by having 56 receptions for 711 yards. In fact, his 56 receptions ranked 3rd across the entire NFL for tight ends, and ranked 1st in the NFC. He was that good. From 1979 to 83, the Packers played 73 regular season games, and Coffman started all 73 of them. And his numbers over that stretch were legitimately impressive. He made it to 3 straight Pro Bowls from 1982 to 84, and was a key part in some of the best passing offenses on paper during the 1980s, where you had Lynn Dickey thrown to him, John Jefferson, and James Lofton. He helped the Packers make it to the postseason in 1982, which was their first playoff appearance in a decade. Part of why they made the playoffs was their stunning come-from-behind victory against the Los Angeles Rams, where the Packers trailed 23-0 in the second half, and Coffman scored 2 touchdowns, including the go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter, to help Green Bay prevail 35-23. He received a few All-Conference and All-Pro nominations from various newspaper outlets. In 1983, his 11 receiving touchdowns ranked 4th in the entire NFL and 2nd across all tight ends, only behind Todd Christensen of the Los Angeles Raiders. And throughout Lynn Dickey's NFL career, it was clear that Coffman was one of his favorite targets, as the two men connected for 35 touchdowns. As a side note, to learn more about Lynn Dickey and the crazy ending to his tenure in Green Bay, click the card in the upper right corner. Coffman played with Green Bay until the end of the 1985 season, and then played 2 seasons with the Chiefs and 1 with the Vikings before hanging it up after the 1988 season. And the funny part is that even though he was reunited with Spani in Kansas City for a year in 1986, after the 1986 season, Spani never played in the NFL again, meaning that Coffman actually outlasted Spani. When Coffman's career was over, his numbers were incredible, especially for an undrafted tight end. He finished with 154 games played over 103 starts, 339 receptions, 4,340 yards, and 42 touchdowns, with 39 of them coming with Green Bay. To this day, Coffman is the franchise's all-time leader in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns amongst tight ends. And when his time in Green Bay ended in 1985, he was 7th all-time in franchise history in receiving yards and 6th all-time in touchdowns. Coffman was inducted into the Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame in 1994, which I'm sure was the last thing he ever expected to have happen when he went up to Coach Meyer and asked if he could do some drills. There are plenty of incredible stories throughout the NFL of players who were complete no-names and were not expecting to get drafted in any way whatsoever, getting an out-of-nowhere opportunity to play and shine at the professional level. I talked about another one of these crazy stories with Minnesota Vikings quarterback Bob Lee, and how a scout just saw him throwing one day to no one in particular and liked the way he threw the ball. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And this is another one of those crazy moments. I guess the moral of the story here is that it never hurts to ask. The worst case scenario is that they say no. The best case scenario is that you're remembered as a legendary football player and you carve a decade-long career out for yourself in the National Football League. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.